All right. We got an interesting story here. Rob G, can you jump in? And Kerry, this is up your alley because along with being a great football player and now a former football player, you're in this business, movies, television, you act, you've been doing this for a long time. And Rob G, tell the story and people who have not heard this, because this is interesting. So give us the news and then the latest.
Sure. So if you don't know the story, it involves Michael Oher, who was the focus of the movie The Blindside, which I'm sure everybody has seen.
Yes.
Made hundreds of $millions in the box office. So in the movie, of course, he gets adopted by the Sean and Leanne Toohey, and he's made to believe like they're almost his savior, that he's this bumbling, stumbling kid, doesn't really like football, is very soft-spoken,
and
very
they whipped him into shape.
And they whipped him into shape,
exactly.
and he became an all-pro.
They saved him.
They saved him.
Him.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, he's been on the record for years now saying that that's not what happened at all. I was already a high-end athlete before I even met them, but they did end up taking him in. Well, now things have gotten really spicy because he's filed a lawsuit alleging that the Tooheys, who took him in when he was in high school, never actually adopted him when he was living with them, and instead got him to sign a conservatorship over him, which allowed them to profit off of his image and likeness, not only with the movie, but moving forward, even when he got to the NFL. And he alleges that the Tooheys, along with their two other birth children, took in royalties from the movie that made over $300 million, and he didn't receive a single cent.
Oh, God. Oh, my God. I'm sick.
But it gets more. There's more going on because Mr. Toohey spoke to TMZ after all of this broke, and he called the allegations, quote, insulting. And he says on the record, quote, "We didn't make any money off the movie. While Michael Lewis, who was the author of the book that became the movie, gave us half of his share, everybody in the family got an equal share, including Michael, and it was only about $14,000.
How? How can a movie make that and they only get $14,000?
That's his story.
Oh.
Does that sound right? That doesn't even make sense. And I know Hollywood has the funny bookkeeping. You know that.
Yes, they do.
Hollywood,
Yes, they do.
where they say you take a percentage of the net.
Yep.
And when they do the math, there's nothing left over from a movie that brought in $200 million. Like when they do their math.
Oh, easily.
And right? And then they say, well, yeah, you got to take the gross, right?
Yes.
Not the net.
Yes.
Never the net.
Never the net. Oh, the gross. So this story is it's foul on a lot of levels. Number one, if the conservatorship thing was a real deal, that's shady, right? That part is that's bad for business. But the one thing that happens with movies, you have these stories happening, right? Where obviously Michael Oher, he couldn't have been a bad football player and got whipped into shape 2 years into his last 2 years of high school to become
where
who he
became,
is,
right?
So obviously you take liberties as you make movies to make it more interesting for the screen, and that stuff happens. So I saw Michael Oher talking about that as his career was going on in Baltimore, saying the story wasn't actually true or portrayed in the correct way. So I know that was a problem in the beginning, but that's neither here nor there. If that family was taking advantage of him and making money on the side and not including him in the mix, man, that's bad for business.
Now let me ask you this. Couple things.
Yep.
I don't think that there's a movie if it was a black family who adopted him. Is that like because it became like they saved him. You know what I mean? And
yes,
that's the inspiring part of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
The white
right?
saviors, and also just being a bumbling kid that had nowhere to go, no future, and then they brought him to this
right, and
they
go like, "Oh, look what we did.
Look what we can do for you."
Exactly. No, it had a lot
guys,
of that.
Even to your point, Michael Oher has gone on the record several times, going back to 2015, where he was saying during the draft process, teams didn't take him seriously because they thought because of the movie that he might have been slow or not a fast learner because of the way he was portrayed in the film.
Exactly.
No, definitely right, and that's the thing. Now, here's the other part I got to ask. So the Hollywood, you know what,
yeah,
they have a license, a literary license to change stuff because they need to make it so that
it's got to be appealing.
Right, it has to be appealing. It can't be just verbatim. It's not a documentary.
Exactly.
Where you're altering news.
Right.
And I always say all bets are off after you watch the 10 Commandments. I've been to Egypt. Nobody there is white.
Exactly.
Okay? So when you watch a movie like that, do you
Yeah.
know what I'm saying?
Yes, I do.
Like you got to understand this is what Hollywood does.
The Hollywood part of it is
Right.
it is what it is. I mean, you're trying to make the story the most appealing to make money. That's just the bottom line.
Like the
right?
Rocky, and the same thing. If Rocky's black, the movie doesn't have the same appeal if he beats Mr. T. Does it?
No. If Apollo Creed if that was the movie at that time, and he was beating up on Rocky, yeah, the movie wouldn't have been the same.
I mean, there's a
it wouldn't have been the same lore. No.
Right. There's
Yeah.
a certain thing. Same thing when they did the one. They did checked all the boxes. First, it's the white guy being the black guy,
Yeah.
then it's the white guy being the Russian guy.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like
Yes, I
there's
do.
all these boxes for Hollywood, so I get that, and I'm not naive, and I'm not thinking, like I understand. It's a little bit of fantasy, and they do have a poetic license to change and alter stuff. But I wonder in this case of Michael Oher, just like giving up your story to somebody,
Yeah.
like the guy who wrote the book, I think this is a lesson for people.
And I think that's the real question as well. Did he give his story up, or did the family give it up? And that's another story to talk about, right? So obviously, if he was in the conservatorship, they could give that story away, right, without him even having
having
a say in it. So that's the part I want to kind of dig into and see.
This is interesting.
It's interesting.
Yeah, it's interesting to me. I mean, I know a lot of people watched it. You said, Rob G, what did you say? It made $300 million? Yeah, it is one of those
And
movies.
they won an Oscar.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's one of those movies that, is compelling and people could get into, oh, my God, how did this happen? And, but I just wonder, as you go on or as you have a story, you got to be real careful who you deal with. It happens a lot.
And when you're giving your story up, you have to have in those contracts that you have some say-so in the story direction as well. So that's another part that people, kind of gloss over.
Because we had George Foreman on, didn't we, Rob G? He talked about that, like when they just did about his life.
Yeah.
And he said a lot of it wasn't real. You know what I mean? But
Yeah.
they have to spice it up.
Yeah, you got to be
Because most of life is mundane. Let's just be honest.
100%. Like, you have to spruce it up. But I think if you get on and have producing rights as well, and which he obviously didn't, but if you have producer rights and you have some say-so in the story, you can save some moments and make it more realistic to your story and your experience.
I just wonder if people, when they were watching it, when people watch movies, and obviously it's not like a fantasy like The Wizard of Oz. That's a
Right.
fantasy. So we
One
know
of my favorites.
No, that's my all-time favorite.
No, it isn't.
Yes,
I
it is.
say that. That's crazy. Rob.
That's my all-time favorite. I've seen it 150 times.
I've seen it so many times.
Right.
That's crazy. Yeah, yeah.
It's a great movie. And you know what? And Kerry, you'll appreciate this. So how the movie got saved, Rob G, listen up, is the movie where it's a musical.
Yes.
Have you seen it, Rob G? When was the last time you saw it? Christmas, Thanksgiving?
A couple years ago, but yeah,
Okay.
I've seen it. Yeah,
Thanks,
Okay.
guys.
I think I have the VHS still somewhere
you
in
have
the
it?
box. Yeah.
Keep
Okay.
it. Keep that.
Keep that. Yeah,
Don't get rid of it.
So what happens is the movie runs long. It's a musical. There's songs in the beginning. And then if you go to the second half of the movie, there's no songs.
Yeah.
Because they edited out all the songs. One of the songs they edited out was The Jitterbug. Have you ever heard it?
Of course.
You
Yeah.
know that.
Yeah.
And it saved the movie in that the Jitterbug is a dated dance.
Yes.
Like it puts a timestamp on it.
Yeah. Ah, yeah. Yeah, yeah.
Think about that.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
That's a dance from the 20s.
That's a big deal.
Yes. And
All that matters too.
it does. Because that was supposed to be fantasy once she leaves, gets to Oz.
Yes.
But yeah, I those kind of movies are fantasy, but stories like Michael Oher, you just wonder when people watch them, do they believe most of the stuff you're watching? Do you always question it, or are you just being there? Here's a question: are you bothered now? Like you hear the details,
Right.
Does that change the movie for you when you realize that maybe what I saw wasn't as heartwarming and as like it doesn't warm my heart anymore because I know it wasn't true.
It doesn't for me because, number one, I don't take that stuff close to heart at all anyway. I know what the business is. I know what the experience is too. So I'm there if I want to watch something that's not that I know is fiction and I know is not based in reality. I'm just there to enjoy the movie.
Right. See, I think this was like a heartwarming movie for sports fans.
Yeah.
And they they loved it. Obviously, 300 million ticket sales. You know what I mean? People went to see it.
Right.
And I think now if I start to hear that the family maybe ain't all that it was cracked up to be, they were using this kid, I don't feel as good or as heart. My heart doesn't feel the same about the movie. I watched it. I'm not going to erase it from my memory.
Exactly.
But I don't feel as good now when the details start to come out.
Yeah, it sucks. That part sucks about it. But I'm also not somebody that's invested in the movie in general, so I'm not going back to watch it or have this huge affinity for it anyway. It was just an experience at that time. And so
see, that's a good way of looking at it. Like you just saying, like, I just went to go watch a movie for 2 or 3 hours, and after it's over, it's over.
Oh yeah, you want to be transported in time for a bit. You want to get out of your the like you said, the mundane life that that we have and experience at times, and go see a heartwarming film, and you watch it for that time, and then you move on. But
okay, let me say this real quick. So me and you both have the Wizard of Oz. What's your number 2 movie? I'm just curious.
You wanted my number 2?
Yeah.
My number 2 movie of all time is The Bad Seed.
The Bad Seed.
That's 1950s. It's black and white. McCormick. Betty McCormick won the Oscar, or she was nominated for the Oscar for. So The Bad Seed's about this kid that becomes hereditary, right? If you do bad things, and it's been bad things passed through generations.
Right.
So she was the Bad Seed, and Nancy McCormick is her name. Sorry. She became the first protagonist in a horror film for a kid. She was a kid in the movie, and she became the first protagonist in the film for a horror movie. So
Bad Seed.
One of my favorites.
I'm gonna say this: the original Planet of the Apes is number 2.
You
know who wrote that?
Who wrote that one?
Rod Serling was one of the writers on that, and at the end, when the Statue of Liberty is buried in the sand, that is a Twilight Zone.
Yeah.
That ain't no spoiler. It's been out since 1939. I'm not spoiling for anybody who spoiler for a 1939 movie.
Don't give it away.
I was thinking of The Wizard of Oz in 1939.
Yeah.
And The Wizard of Oz did not win Best Picture in 1939. Iowa Sam, who won? 1939. The Wizard of Oz did not win Best Picture.
Drum roll. Come on.
Iowa Sam, when you hit a button?
Sorry, I had the wrong mic on there. Was it Casablanca?
No.
I don't know. I
Gone with
wasn't
the
around
Wind.
then.
Gone with the Wind.
Oh, of course.
Can you imagine those two movies came out the same year?
Same time. It's crazy.
All right.
Born yet? For
No, I
40
know.
years.
I'm just saying.